and he's going to pull a Nolan Ryan. That's another thing we have to talk about too. We don't have to talk about it tonight, but we could talk about it another time. I watched the Nolan Ryan documentary on Netflix. I suggest you watch it. That man is one of the toughest human beings ever to put on a baseball glove. Ever. 51 pitching records, Eric. 25 of which that will never in the history of baseball, even if baseball goes on for another 1,000 years, will not be broken.
And one of the biggest blunders in Mets history by trading him away, right?
Now, that's another thing I'm going to say to you about this right now. I got into it with somebody the other day who's a big Met fan like me who called me not a Met. You know why he called me not? Listen, he's a little bit of an older Met fan than me. He says you're not a good Met fan. The question was, thinking back in retrospect, do you want Nolan Ryan or Tom Seaver on that baseball team? I want Nolan Ryan on that baseball team, even though Tom Seaver, yes, he's one of the greatest Mets of all time. He's one of the greatest pitchers of all time. But you know what, though? Nolan Ryan had something that 99.9% of the professional athletes that come in don't have. And I would have rather had Nolan Ryan, knowing the longevity of his career and knowing, how he did, knowing how both of their careers turned out. They both turned out Hall of Fame careers, great pitchers, this, that, and the other thing. I would have rather had Nolan Ryan than Tom Seaver on the Mets baseball team. And I don't know if I'm crazy saying that, but...
Yeah, no doubt. Ryan was a bulldog, basically, I mean, I don't know what the Mets were thinking when they traded him for, Jim Progosi.
Oh, my God.
But look at the career Ryan had. I mean, you said 25 records, Rich, that will never be broken?
No, he's got 51 total, but just off the top of my head, just thinking about some of these, obscure records that will never be broken.
No-hitters alone, right? 7 no-hitters, right?
No, he threw a no-hitter at 42 years old, dude.
Yep.
He threw 3 in one season.
Yep.
And you know what, though? And you want to hear something crazy about him is, another thing, you want to argue people are compilers. You want to argue people that have been around. You want to argue this. But compiling goes other ways, too. Because you could play for 27 years in your perspective sport, and you could compile little hits, and you could compile little touchdowns, but you also compile other stuff, too. Led the league in what do you call it, in walks. I mean, he's in history, he's got some crazy, where he walked the most people, where he hit the most people. He's got negative records too, but that goes with longevity also. But there is nobody, and there is what you call, and this documentary I watched on Netflix about him, Eric, you should watch this, dude. It's amazing. And there's 3 people in this documentary that I'm going to name right now that this is like their idol. 2 of them, it's their idol, and the one guy is, as you think, is the biggest prick ever, Pete Rose. You got to hit away. No, but I know you don't like him, and I know he's a prick, and Pete Rose talks shit about everybody, but Pete Rose calls this guy the toughest guy ever. He calls him a bulldog. He goes, I would mess with everybody in Major League Baseball before I mess with Nolan Ryan even once, and I don't care if he's 50 years old. I'll tell you right now, that's the toughest son of a bitch I ever met in my entire life. He says that motherfucker threw at me more times, and I knew it was coming, than anybody. Wow. He goes, Pete Rose knew that if he got up and he roped a double into left, or he bunted, or he stole a base or something, he knew the first pitch is going right at his head. He just knew it. And
you don't see too much in today's game anymore.
And you know what he said about that too, which is crazy. He says, instead of saying he goes, I expected it, because that's how you play the game. I expected that ball to come at my head. And Pete Rose is a lunatic. And then you sit there and you watch this documentary about 2 guys who were never fans of the media, never talked to anybody, never spoke soliloquies about anybody. But you're sitting there watching Roger Clemens and Randy Johnson, 2 no-personality guys, talk about this man like he's God. Like he's God. And you're talking about 2 of the greatest pitchers of all time, talking about Nolan Ryan like he's a literal god. Randy Johnson, I think maybe smile. I think I might have seen him smile maybe 4 or 5 times in his entire career. He smiled. He smiled this entire documentary, dude, talking about Nolan Ryan. Unbelievable to watch the passion that these guys had for him. And these guys are dicks, and the passion they had for this pitcher, dude. Eric, you gotta watch it. You gotta. I'm sorry I kicked it into such high gear all of a sudden, man. But Jacob deGrom got me all pissed off.
Speaking about Roger Clemens, though, did you catch the Michael K. A-Rod show during the Yankees-Red Sox game on Sunday night? Did you see that?
You mentioned it to me before, and I didn't really know too much about it, but I delved into it a little bit. Why don't you fill me in a little bit, because I'm sure I have an opinion on it.
Yeah. Well, Barry Bonds came on, and was pure gold.
Yeah.
Barry Bonds, he looked so personable. It's like this was a totally different Bonds. I don't know if he had a little, he smoked a little Toots-Garootsky before he went on or something like that. If you know what I mean.
He probably did. Yeah.
He was so laid back, and he talked hitting. I mean, he was the hitting coach for the Marlins under Mattingly, right? I believe he was the hitting coach for like a year or two.
No,
This guy needs to be in the broadcast booth because he was awesome, Barry Bonds.
Right.
I never saw Barry Bonds